episode 18 of Is This a Dream? So I'll wait to see some messages from people. All right, great. I can see a few people jumping on. Let me know if the audio and video is coming through. This is the book that we're covering with all the glare. Is This a Dream? And we are now on the chapter, The 3 Stages of Meditation. All right, this is chapter 5, The 3 Stages of Meditation. The book is available on Amazon. If you're able to, please do check it out. And if you've read the book or you're reading the book, then please do leave a review. So I see some people saying no video. Let me see. Okay, I see video. Great. All right, Periscope, LinkedIn seems to be working. Gabriella, thank you. Marie, thank you. Working well. Okay. Well, wait a couple more seconds. So I know a couple people can't see video. Okay, good quality now. Hello. All right. Everything seems to be coming through. Thank you, April. I see you too. At least I see your chat message. Okay. And the audio looks like it's okay as well. Fantastic. So as people are logging in here, Hope is asking for the book again. Sure. Here's the book. Is This a Dream? And the book itself is looking kind of dreamy because it's made of the glare. All right. So as people are logging in, let's take a few moments together. Ease yourself into yourself. Relax unto yourself. Feel into the space that we are sharing. This space that we are sharing across physical space in spite of physical distance. This shared space. And since we're talking about meditation, or since we're on the chapter of meditation, we'll spend some more time playing with meditation. So right now, if there are thoughts circulating, emotions circulating, memories, if certain perceptions are calling to your attention, notice them and let them be. neither hanging on nor pushing away. Like the leaves that blow by with an autumn breeze. Some of the leaves may swirl around you, may fall near you, and eventually they move on. Rest in this safe space. Breathe fully and easily, as though the breath flows through you from head to toe. Here, there are no good or bad thoughts, they're just thoughts. There are no spiritual and materialistic thoughts, they're thoughts. In meditation, if a thought arises, a thought is a thought is a thought. Breathe, rest, notice. All right. Hello again. So we're on the chapter on meditation. So maybe we'll do more meditation through this. We'll take a couple questions. One of the questions I saw, I think, was asked during the broadcast last week. Why does reality go to linear time? Why can't it stay at timelessness? I want to address that quickly again. You can go back last week to see the detailed response. Check out episode 17 last week for the more detailed response. But quickly, I want to address this again because it really brings into focus the three minds and what they're about. So, why does reality go to linear time? If reality is timeless, then why do we experience linear time? And the key, one of the keys in recognizing the three minds is in noting that reality itself is not changing, right? At least if we're defining reality as that underlying substratum, as that which is most fundamental, then this reality is not changing, right? However, this change appears in association with a particular configuration of the mind, right? So everything we're talking about, or most things that we're talking about, is talking about particularities, differences, similarities, comparing, contrasting. This is the nature of communication in language, right? Language deals with particularity. And so we're very much using first mind concepts, right? That first mind, which superimposes the boundary that it experiences on what we call this reality, and therefore appears as this world of change. So, from that first mind perspective, there is this world of multiplicity, right? As the second mind perspective, the very same reality, which is recognized as multiplicity, is recognized as the dance of unity and multiplicity, right? The essential non difference of unity and multiplicity is recognized as the second mind. And the third mind is the potential nature itself, uninterpreted. So, what has happened to reality in these three minds, across these three configurations of mind? Nothing. Nothing has happened to reality. However, the interpretation and it's being accessed from different perspectives and therefore seen differently. Just as many months ago, when we started talking about these three minds, we talked about how the waves of the ocean see each other as different, right? If we personify them, if they could see each other, they all see multiple waves, first mind perspective. The ocean knows differently. The ocean says, well, there's only me, there's this one ocean, and my limbs are these waves. The first mind waves are not recognizing this because they're born and they die. They don't see the substratum in which they live. The second mind ocean says, well, these waves come and go, they are all me, right? And the third mind water says, what ocean? What wave? I'm just water, right? If you take water away, there's no ocean, there's no wave. So what ocean, what wave are we talking about, right? So water appears as ocean, wave, multiplicity, unity, diversity, dancing. Water appears as multiple waves, befriending each other, having arguments with each other, right? Water itself is not different just because it may appear as a form of a wave. The wave itself is nothing other than water, and it has its unique tendencies as water. So when we say, why does reality go to linear time? It's not that reality goes to linear time. The first mind can bite off so much of what is here. And when what is bitten off is a certain amount, then that which is timeless goes through modifications, which is what we talked about last time, right? From timelessness to change to sequence to rhythm to linear clock time, right? So it is according to that mind, according to that configuration, reality is interpreted differently. And no matter what we're saying, because as we said, we're using particularities, we're using comparisons and contrasts, right? So the language and concepts will necessarily be limited. And that is the beauty of it, right? Why are we talking about this in 2020 when people were talking about this in 2000 years ago, 5000 years ago? Why are we still talking about it today? Because language can never reach it. And so language is constantly stammering, right? There's always a new way to say it as society changes, culture changes, language changes, right? The events around us change. Accordingly, that which cannot be put into the words are always being modified and approximated through words, which is why we emphasize seeing through the language. This is why we take pauses. This is why it's not just nonstop throughout, because the pauses give us that time for the attention to dive and surface and see the context and the content weaving with each other. So if you think about a car when you're driving, you might see somebody turn on their blinker, right? If they're going to turn right, they turn on their right blinker and it's blinking. And then the car turns right. Okay. But you've seen sometimes that the right blinker is on and this car is going for miles with the blinker on, right? So the blinker does not necessarily give us the answer as to what's going on. The blinker is an indicator, right? It's actually the movement of the car that tells us. We can rely on it because we're used to blinkers. There are traffic rules. We have a common culture in which the blinker means something, so we can generally rely on it. But if we rely solely on that blinker, then we're going to make some mistakes because the blinker is not always correct. And the blinker can never really tell us exactly what that car is going to be experiencing, what that driver is going to be experiencing. Similarly, language is a blinker, right? It's telling us how to direct attention, right? Direct it here, direct it here. First mind, second mind, third mind, you, me, space, time, reality, emotion, thought. So much in language. Consciousness used in 100 different ways, right? So language is a blinker. We can use it, but let's not become dependent on the language. We use the language to see through to what is actually happening. What is the actual movement that the mind is taking, right? Just as we watch that car, what is the car's movement? Sometimes the right blinker will be on, I'm sure you've seen this, and the car is going left. It's switching into the left lane as the right blinker is on, right? So you really have to brake and slow down because you don't know which way this car is going to move. So similarly, sometimes the words can be completely misleading depending on if the context one person is hearing it is different from the context that a person is saying it. The words can be totally confusing. So recognize the use of language and use it as an indicator without becoming entirely dependent on it. If all of humanity meditates, would reality cease to be perceived? So this goes to what Einstein asked, does a moon exist if you're not looking at it? And the question really is, which moon, right? When you and I look at the moon, we see a different moon. Our perception, what we recognize is our perception that the brain has interpreted from the reflected light. And the perception that you see is different from the perception I see. And every person that looks at the moon will have a different perception of the moon. And then we tally our perceptions and we say, okay, they all look very similar. This is what the moon is. But when we define when we define this, whatever that is, as the moon, it is really a collective interpretation, a collective conception, right? This moon that we say exists independently of us, nobody has ever perceived. It is an extrapolation, a conceptual extrapolation of the idea that all of our perceptions are of some one thing. So what is that one thing? So here we would say from a second mind perspective that that one thing is, there is some one thing, yes. However, that is not a physical structure that is out there and localized. That one thing is the same one thing that differentiates as both the observer and that moon that is observed. So that one thing, the real moon, so to speak, is not out there, sitting there up in space as we see it. That is the interpreted moon. That is a consequence of the human nervous system and the human mind and interpretation, right? So that underlying reality or the underlying world or the substratum is not something which is perceived through the senses. It's not something which is perceived through any instrument. It doesn't matter how sensitive the instrument is. Any instrument necessarily modifies that which is perceiving by virtue of its mechanism of perception, whatever lens it's using, right? And whatever design went into that instrument. What was the mind that designed that instrument? How did it design the instrument to perceive, to receive light? So if we take that and then we get back to this question, if all of humanity meditates, would reality cease to be perceived? Well, perception is always relative to what we're doing, right? But reality is not something that's perceived to begin with. It is not something that's perceived with the sense organs, with eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, right? These are detecting stimuli from the world which result in modified perceptions. So the way we're using reality here, or the way it's used in this question, it is not something that is perceived by the sense organs. It is this underlying second mind nature, right? The undifferentiated nature that is being referred to as reality, right? And that, even for one person, depending on the configuration of the mind, the recognition of this world will be different. So the modified perceptions are not perceived, and the underlying nature is recognized. Just like in the earlier question, why does reality go to linear time? It's not that reality goes to linear time. According to the configuration of the mind, it meets a particular interpretation of reality. So similarly, if that mind is in a second mind configuration or a third mind configuration, then there is no perception of a modified world, right? The modified world is indeterminate. Now, it's not just humanity, there are many living beings. We're also one civilization. There are trillions of planets, probably more in the universe. So it's not just a matter of even 8 billion people on Earth, right? It's a matter of the entire collective mind. We're speaking from the perspective of Advaita Vedanta, where world is interpreted as mind. So we're talking about across the cosmos. What is interpreted as the Big Bang from one perspective is interpreted as the expression of mind from another perspective, right? What some might call a quantum vacuum, another might call undifferentiated, non-local consciousness, right? So that reality, when seen from an interpretation, presents itself as multiplicity. So reality is unchanging, is the upshot. Let's see, we have about 20 minutes left. So someone commented, I just want to be what I am, and normal is not normal to me. We see this is common in the society, and this is why we do these talks. This is why we talk about consciousness. This is why there is there are questions about what consciousness is, right? It is because we recognize, everybody recognizes, that there is something more than this, than what we're seeing on the surface level. Now, whether we articulate it or how we articulate it and how we go about exploring that is different, right? One person will do it through experimenting with the world externally. Another person will do it through experimenting with the mind, with the lens that sees the world, right? Another person may put off experimenting with it. It's too much or it's too difficult. So the way we engage with it is different, but many people recognize that there's more than meets the eye. In fact, it's quite obvious. We know that there are cells. We know that there are atoms, but with the eye, with the naked eye, we don't see cells and atoms, right? So we know for a fact there's more than meets the eye, right? So this desire to just be me, to just be who I am, right? As this person said, I just want to be what I am. It stems deeply from this recognition that there is more to what I am than is being recognized in popular society or being recognized in academic society, right? This is not something that's really discussed in schools. I think now some of that is changing. We're talking more about emotions. They're talking more about mind. They're taking time to sit with themselves without having to do an activity to recognize the nature of one's own mind, one's own sense of identity. These are steps in the right direction. Generally speaking, a discussion or exploration about what we are at subtler levels is not part of the educational system and popular and academic society. And that's why we have the society that we do. And as a result, there is this desire, I just want to be what I am, right? Which is essentially universal and which is the core of this statement, be yourself. It's the feeling that informs this statement, be yourself, that probably all of us have heard growing up. Be yourself. Not easy to do when what we are is not recognized and talked about. But this is why we're here. This is why we're having these conversations. So next question, what are the differences between meditation and dreaming? There are many differences, but maybe the most important one, maybe the biggest one, is that in dreaming, there's attention to all the forms, and we ourselves are a character within this dream. And depending on the exact kind of dream, we might be completely as that character, or maybe a little bit less as the dream character. However, the very nature of the dream is that there are forms, there are events, there are identities, there's an experience of time, there is space, right? So all of the ingredients that we have in this waking state, for example, are present in the dream as well. Meditation is different in that meditation is a process of seeing through our many layers, right? So the dreaming mind is one kind of layer, that mind which projects a certain identity, a certain body, personality, that projects a field of space and time, events. That is the dreaming mind, right? The modified mind as time, space, event, localized identity. The meditative mind is that mind which may recognize this dreaming mind, but is not stuck at this layer of dreaming. Right? It can recognize that nature of dreaming, it can recognize the nature of waking, and it is not clinging to either of these. It is not restricted to one of these. One way to say it is that the elevator hasn't stopped at the dreaming floor. Right? The elevator's still moving. It might go up some, it might go down some, but it's not stuck at dreaming. It's not stuck at waking. Right? By moving through these, by recognizing these, it's starting to see that which underlies all of these. That is the meditative mind. So the dreaming mind is stopped at the level of form, time, space, event. The meditative mind doesn't stop there. Right? Eventually, it moves on. It recognizes it, but that's not the point of meditation. It's to move on and recognize more deeply what is this awareness that recognizes even the dreaming mind. So some thoughts on the following relative to the non-dual teaching. So these are the thoughts. God is what you believe it is. No one is wrong about the existence of God, and yet no one is right about their knowledge of God. All will quarrel and argue about the greatness of God and their own knowledge of it. Yeah, before we get to God, even if you talk about mind, right? To even talk about what is mind, that's a lifetime in terms of our society. Everybody has different definitions, right? And many who are talking about it, including in academic circles, don't really have a definition. It's just this vague feeling that we call mind. So one person says, no, mind is my thoughts, and my heart is different. My heart is my feelings, mind is my thoughts. Okay. Another person says, no, mind is heart, is thoughts and feelings, and it's also this broader field. Okay. Another person says the mind is there only when the brain is awake, in the awake state, or dreaming. Right? Another person comes up with something called the three minds. So you see that even when we talk about mind, to even figure out what it is that we're talking about, let's say 5 people are talking about mind, that could take forever. So now let's come to your comment that God is what you believe it is. No one is wrong about the existence of God. No one is right about their knowledge of God. You could say the same thing about mind, right? Mind is what you believe it is. No one is wrong about the existence of mind. No one is right about their knowledge of mind. Because as a society, we don't have a standard. We don't have a standardized experience or understanding of mind. It's not something that we've paid attention to, right? You would not be able to say this as much about, let's say, addition, right? The mathematical function of addition. If we said addition is what you believe it is, no one is wrong about addition, no one is right, we would not accept that. Because in our society, we've thought about addition for a long time. We've notated it very particularly for a long time. We've taught it very precisely starting from grade school all the way up for a long time. So societally, we have a very clear construct of what addition is, right? Now, if you go, for example, in Vedanta, and you talk about mind, Vedanta has a very particular definition. Or if you talk about reality, Vedanta has a very particular definition of reality, right? So in Vedanta, you couldn't say reality is what you believe it is. No one is wrong about reality. No one is right, right? So you have to look, it's relative to the knowledge base of that culture. Given where the world is now, and given how many contexts the word God is used, and how in the name of God, many people have done horrible things and many people have done great things, the word itself is a big question mark, right? So in that context, we certainly could say God is what you believe it is. No one is wrong. No one is right. However, this doesn't really get us anywhere. It's better to ask, what is it that we mean by this word God, right? Do we mean something that we call ultimate reality? Do we mean something that is formless and transcendent? Or do we mean people that we believe have certain superpowers? Or do we mean celestial beings in other dimensions? What does it mean? What does this word mean? Right? That's where the conversation has to start. And once we identify that, then once we recognize and allow that different people have different definitions for this, then we can start to have some kind of conversation. But generally, as a world culture, we're not there yet, right? And that's why people say, you know, my God is better than yours, or your God is wrong, or if you don't call my God's name, then this will happen to you. And all this kind of stuff is the immature mind, right? That demands, that is holding on, grasping for dear life to something, right? So that the floor doesn't fall out, the rug is not pulled out from beneath it, right? But at some point, one has to ask, what do these three letters really indicate? And I can't just take this person's word for it, that person's word for it. They sound wise. This one sounds like a fool. This one sounds like they know what they're talking about. This goes on endlessly, right? Where is my investigation? Where am I in the investigative process? This is the question each of us has to ask. Then we can talk about God at different levels with any definition. Whatever definition the other person wants to use, sure, let's start with that. Or we can say, God, there's no God, sure, right? Let me be an atheist. God, I'm not sure about that. There could not be. Great, I can be agnostic. No, God has to be called Shiva. Okay, I'm Hindu. No, God has to be the father of Jesus. Okay, I'm Christian. There's no problem with any of these, right? These are different ways of conceiving, different ways that a first mind conceives of something that is beyond itself, right? The third mind is interpreted in some way as God. And specifically, when it starts to take on some kind of form, we start to use that as a symbol of the second mind, right? So recognizing this, one can use labels freely without being restricted by them. And this is the idea behind non-duality, that it is not the language or the idea or the concept which restricts, it is our own identity and dependence on that idea. So we've covered quite a bit today. Let's take a few moments together. So we talked about the 3 stages of meditation. In the beginning, we said, notice, right? Relaxing and noticing. This we might call stage one. Now, you could talk about no stages, 3 stages, 10 stages. That's a different matter. This is simply one way to see the process. So, relaxing and noticing, allowing attention to notice whatever arises when we don't have an agenda. This is stage one. Breathe fully and easily. If you're noticing any thoughts, perceptions, emotions, arisings, if possible, now notice the awareness that was noticing those things. The thoughts might pull you back, emotions may pull you back. If so, go back to noticing those. Just so you know, many spend decades without recognizing stage one. It's just not a priority, or has not been a priority in the past in our society. So we might talk about these stages in minutes, but these stages can be lifetimes, depending on the depth to which we talk about each stage. And that should not dissuade anyone, because just as it might take lifetimes, it can also simply take moments. So, first noticing thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and then gently shifting attention to the awareness itself that was observing those thoughts, feelings. From stage one to stage two, there's a greater degree of peace. Stage one can sometimes seem overwhelming if there are many thoughts, emotions, memories that haven't been attended to for a long time. This is often the frustrating stage of meditation because it seems like meditation is more agitating than not meditating. Just know that feeling has been shared by all meditators. Continue to gently, as possible, redirect attention to the awareness itself that was illumining those thoughts, emotions, memories. Feel the mind stabilize, ground, root, fully and easily. Entire system. As attention rests within itself, as attention rests comfortably as awareness, without being yanked by thought and emotion, and as awareness tastes itself, gets a taste of itself, and not simply the thoughts that it was chomping on. As it recognizes this taste and relaxes as itself, this becomes the second stage of meditation. So open your eyes when you're ready. Next week, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about stage 3, and then we'll go to chapter 6. If you have questions about meditation or anything else, please do leave them in the comments, and we will get to them next time. Thank you.